Hey, this is David again. I'm going to tell the story today about one of the people that I prayed for about 12 hours later and what happened. So I worked at a kids camp, a youth camp, as a nurse when I first became a nurse. And I met a lot of good friends there, and I would work nights. So during the day and on weekends, the other people would be cleaning, so I'd just kind of go help them out and do what I could because I had a lot of free time since I was just really available at nights for emergencies. When we became very good friends, and then I went on, after that summer was over and they moved on. Of course, it was just a summer job for them going to college. And I hadn't seen anyone from the camp there for quite some time. I'm going to say it was a year, but anyway, I don't remember exactly the time, but that's irrelevant. So it must have been on a Tuesday. Anyway, bear with me, okay? I know there's lots of details and I'm trying to piece it together, and I'm trying to not have to edit too much. Also trying to do it all in one shot, and I'm gonna throw a couple little things in there that'll help this story, visuals to help this story. So I'm gonna edit this one a little bit. Anyway, all that to say, I went to, so I happened to be in Walmart and saw this kiosk that was from the Texas Unemployment Commission. And I decided to look at it, and I came across this job that was on there that was about jails. Now, understand that there had been a time that I went back down to the camp, that time in between, and just had a one weekend thing to kind of celebrate people that worked at the camp. And I met a guy there, and he was going to, I started talking to him, and I always told Jesus stories wherever I went and was witnessing to people and telling them how to be saved and everything and know God. And I met him, and he said, "So you're looking for a job?" I said, "Well, I'm praying where I need to go next." And he said, "Well, come work for me." I said, he was some big shot in a private jail down south of South Texas. And he started telling me all about it. And he said, "Oh yeah, just, when I get back, I'll get the information, and, here's my number and all this," and gave me his work number, I think it was. And anyway, so I went back and I got my stuff together, and I contacted him, and I couldn't get a hold of him. Well, come to find out that I guess right after he had this happen, he went back and he got fired for no reason. And I forgot how I found that out. But I thought, I didn't even know there were nurses in jails. Didn't really know that at the time because, I'm not in that environment. And so when I was looking at this kiosk, I saw this nurse in a jail, and I said, "Oh, well, I'm going to check that out." So I looked at it and it sounded interesting, and so I got the information and I applied, and it was in Comal County in New Braunfels. So when I was on the way down there, I was just talking to God, just like I do. Didn't shut my eyes. I was driving, and I was on my way down there, and I heard a distinct small voice. I don't know how to describe it other than that, but he said, "Don't do anything extra for anyone," meaning, I was implied at the jail where I was working. I thought, gosh, what a horrible unchristian thing, why would that come through my brain? And then I got there, and the first thing they do is they hand you a book and talk to you about not, about a story. It's a story about a guy that it starts backwards. He ends up getting stabbed, and it reverts back to this model inmate was the one that stabbed him, but he had actually compromised him because the guy started doing little extra things for him. And all of a sudden I realized, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. You're supposed to be firm, fair, and consistent. And so I thought, okay, now I understand what you were saying, God. And so I was like, so that's what I did. I never did anything I wouldn't do for everybody, for anybody. So if I would, you obviously there's rules. You can't take letters out of the facility for someone. You can't, visit someone on the outside or something like that. There's all these things that you can get compromised and they'll take advantage of you. And so I learned by that book and by what God had told me to understand that. So anyway, while I was, before I had started there though, I went from the interview that they had hired me from, and I drove to San Marcos, and I believe my mom was riding with me because we were going somewhere else. And so I drove to San Marcos, and we went to a Wendy's, and we were eating. Of course, we prayed for our meal, and then we were eating, and this guy comes up to us and says, "Yeah, I just wanted to tell you, I just don't see people pray for their meal very much, and I wanted to meet you." And so he introduced himself, and turns out he was the pastor of a little church there called Westover Baptist Church. And so I met him, and I thought, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. Well, while we were there, we were looking at places for me to live in the meantime, and I found this place that was, what was it called? It wasn't Hippie Hollow. It was something like that, something hollow. But anyway, it was an old campground that had concrete cinder block little cabins, really old, and it was on north of Canyon Lake area. So I had talked to the guy, and he didn't, of course, they didn't hold places. I wasn't quite ready to move yet, but I had talked to him, and I wanted to live there, and he said, well, that'll be fine, and Mom was like, I didn't have money. She's like, hey, I can put down a deposit. I said, no, I'll be fine. God will work it all out, so I'll be good. So anyway, we left there. I ended up going to that church, which is kind of cool. Met a lot of people there. But anyway, so I went, when I actually went to start the job, this is, I don't know, a couple weeks later, I would go to Wednesday nights, the service in San Marcos at Westover Baptist Church. And I had to dress in a jail uniform, so I looked like an officer. Actually, I was a jail officer as well, because they got you certified on both of them so that you could freely walk around. And so I was the nurse there and a jail officer. Anyway, but really just did the nursing. So anyway, I decided before I went to church that Wednesday, oops, I gotta back up. Okay, wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so when I actually moved down there, there was not any cabins available. And so he had a campground just below that, and he had a campground type bathroom that nobody had used in years. And so he said, I can rent you a camp spot until something opens. And so I camped down there for several months. And I slept on top of my truck. I had a little Volkswagen diesel pickup with a camper shell, very rare. And I slept on top of the truck, and there was an older guy that had a fancy camp spot. He was friends with the guy. And so he had put electricity out near his place. And I mean, it was just really just ground. It wasn't a campground per se. The campground was actually with the cabins, but they were all being rented out for monthly stuff. It was very, very economically depressed area. Let's just say that. But there were buses and everything to live in that he had converted, and had window units in them, and space heaters, that type of stuff. But there was also these little cabins. Anyway, I ended up camping down there, and the older gentleman that came down there to camp a lot and fish, he offered me electricity, so I got an extension cord, and he let me bring it over and give him, hook into his electricity so I could keep my little ice chest and a fan going for when it was hot. So I camped down there, I'm going to say 3 months, and which was a great time. I got to meet a lot of the little kids there and talk to them about Christ and everything. And anyway, but I had to go in and clean that bathroom up, and so I could get dressed there, and I had to look nice with my uniform, so I had to be real careful. But so it was quite challenging, and there was a lot of people there that didn't understand me being an officer, But anyway, I became friends with everybody there. And one day, I'm getting back to that other part. One day when I decided I was going to church on that Wednesday night, like usual, and I decided I would go into San Marcos and early and go by the outlet mall. And of course, if you've never been to San Marcos, Texas, that is like 2 outlet malls next to each other. And at that time, they were not near as big as they are now. But there's an outlet mall that literally is gigantic, and you can kind of drive by it. Okay, now you mind that this is in the middle of the drought. So I was very fortunate I wasn't getting rained on all the time, but it made it very hot. But it was dry, and so I didn't get rained on. I don't think it rained that entire, no, in fact, it didn't rain that entire summer. It was a really, really dry summer. And so anyway, I drove in, and I want to put a little picture on, or I'm going to try to get a little Google picture of that outlet mall if it still looks like it used to. And I'll put that on there to kind of show my little path. But I pulled up to this, to the side you could drive through, and I drove around looking for a men's store. And so I kind of drove down. I remember it being L-shaped at the time. It's probably way different now. But anyway, at the time, I drove past it and I found this men's store down at the end. But then I ended up going all the way down back to the other end of the L and thought, well, I got lots of time. I need to, waste some time. I'll just do a little bit of shopping. And so I parked the car and, bright sunshiny day. It was beautiful outside. Like I said, hadn't rained in months. And I ended up walking up to the little awning that you could walk under. It's in front of the little mall that you can, walk around on. It's all outside. You walk outside. I don't know what you call those anyway. Strip mall. So I got up there, and then as soon as I got up there, my intent was to go to this one store and then go back to the car and drive down a little further and go to another store and get back in the car and drive down a little further because it's a big place. And anyway, that's what I wanted to do. So I got up to the awning, and as soon as I got up to the little covered part, it started pouring down rain. I mean, we're talking such big drops that I would have been drenched in seconds to go back out to the car. And actually, I think I went in the store and then came back out, and that's when the rain hit, okay? And it just poured. I mean, like I said, almost couldn't see the car from that short a distance. It was raining that hard. And so I was like, well, that's not gonna be worth going out, so I'll just walk down the mall. And when I was walking down the mall, I would go in and out, I think about 3 stores, not even to the point that I was gonna to get, I wasn't getting anything, but I got down to the Sara Lee store. And so I don't even think it's there now, but anyway, the Sara Lee store, now mind you, I don't drink, at that time I didn't drink coffee, but I was drinking flavored coffee like iced at night because I was working and I was trying to get used to working nights. And so I thought, I'd been looking for some different flavors, that I could use. And in the window, they had this great big cardboard shipper. Actually, they had several of them, but there was a great big cardboard shipper that had all these flavors of, like 2 or 4 ounces or whatever of coffee in little bags. So I'd be able to get just a little bit and try multiple flavors to see what I like instead of buying something I didn't like. So I thought, I'm going to go in there because otherwise, I wouldn't go buy food. I don't really have any place to store it besides this little refrigerated ice chest. Now I want to back up from this. Okay, I'm going to stop right there. And so I ended up, I'm not sure how to tell this part, but I'm just going to say it. So maybe I've got this out of order, so I'll give my story away. But anyway, I want to understand that the night before, about 3 o'clock in the morning, or right at 3 o'clock in the morning, I was called to prayer. I don't know what you even call it, but anyway, and I just started praying. And just, just all of a sudden, the Lord was there with me. And that's the best way I could describe it, or I was with him, probably the best way to say it, because he's always present. But it was different. And I was on my face, and tears were streaming out of my eyes. But I wasn't like crying. It was just, best thing I could say is weeping, but I wasn't making sounds or anything. And I was just praying. And in English, for those that think I was doing some strange praying. But anyway, I was praying, and I was just talking to God, and then I was like, well, God, I knew he was right there, and I couldn't look up. And so it's just like, I believe I was actually raised up and seated in heavenly realms in Christ Jesus, like he said in Ephesians. And that's the best way I could describe it. So it's like entering the Holy of Holies, where God manifests himself fully. And I believe that's why I couldn't look up. And I had my eyes closed, and I just lay and I said, God, I don't even know what to pray for. And immediately I started praying for Jason. Now, Jason was a guy that I had worked with at that camp. We had become really good friends, along with several others. And I ended up praying, God, I don't even know where he is. Where is Jason? And just praying that, I just was overburdened by Jason. And so I and then basically lasted some period of time. I don't know. I mean, I didn't really keep track of that, but I did notice when I quit, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. And so I don't know how long I've been praying, but anyway, sometime I'd been praying. And like I said, I wasn't up at that hour normally. But anyway, what ended up happening is and then it was over. Now I want you to understand the part that matters to me was then. It wasn't what I'm fixing to tell you, okay? The part that I had the experience with God was being in his presence, being on my face, weeping in his presence. And then not like when you cry. When you cry, your eyes get puffy, your nose gets runny, all this kind of stuff. I didn't feel any of that when I was done. There was no, it wasn't really emotion, I would say. It was just, I don't know. I don't know how I could say it, but anyway, that's what that's the part I can't explain to anyone. So I left the prayer, went to sleep. Next day, again, I'll get back to that Sara Lee store again. I would never go in there, but I saw this coffee again. So I go in, and instead of looking at the shipper right in the door, which is the only reason I was going to Sara Lee, because they have a lot of stuff that's going to have to be refrigerated or frozen and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. So instead I start walking around the whole thing. Now, the thing's shaped like a horseshoe. It's got like a counter in the middle. It's, and you kind of walk around like in a circle around the outside, and then you end up over by the cash register. So I walked around and looked at everything, didn't pick up a single thing. But when I got to the other side by the cash register, there was another cardboard shipper of that same coffee. And so I knelt down so I could get a better look at them. And I started picking out my several things of coffee. I think I picked out about 3 of them. And I stood up and I put them on the counter. And, behind my, kind of my peripheral vision, I could see that there was a lady there, and then she left, and then a guy came and took her place at the register just as I walked up. And I reached out these to pay for him, and you probably already figured out who it was. It was Jason. I'm literally, and I look at my watch, and it's 3:00 to the exact minute. It's exactly 12 hours from the time that God gave me what to pray for. The Holy Spirit interceded according to his will to put me to be able to see God. And of course, I'm overwhelmed. He's looking at me like, what are you doing here? He goes, what are you doing? I said, oh, you're not going to believe this, because I'd been telling them Jesus stories. We stayed up all night at camp all the time. And I know a couple people have commented on my Facebook that were from that camp with me, because they remember us staying up all night. And yet we'd get up the next day and we would be tired. And anyway, he's like, what? I said, oh, dude, you have no idea. Because he had heard all these Jesus stories, and here he's right in the middle of one. I said, we've got to talk. And so I got his information, and I went on to church. Of course, that night, I am telling anybody who will stand still long enough to hear, a little shorter version than this, but the excitement, it was just God. Totally God. Of course, my church didn't even know what to say. They're just looking at me like, oh my gosh, something definitely happened to this guy. But, anyway, I'm sure it was very, very strange. But, there were wonderful people there, so they were praising God with me. Anyway, I, of course, left there, and, I think God just put us together. We ended up actually being roommates in his trailer for a little bit when I moved closer. I moved from the cabin that I was in to be more near the church, and I started working in the little Kyle prison that's right outside there from San Marcos. But anyway, we became good friends. We, like I said, were roommates for a couple weeks in his little trailer that he was living in, and then we found a duplex, and which was right down the road from the little church that we and of course they started going to the church. His girlfriend was there, and she started going to church with us, and he started going to church there, and then we started meeting other people, and they would introduce people, and of course they would all come to church. So we had a good little college and career class going on there for this little church. Anyway, that is the story. If I think of anything else, I'll add a little corp in, but I think that's the majority of the details. But again, I want to express to you that you can say, obviously something happened, okay? But, and the funny thing is I never did get a belt, which is kind of hilarious, if I recall. But I don't recall getting a belt. I got 3 flavors of coffee, but that's all that matters. And what was interesting was it had rained that entire time. So instead of going back and forth between stores, which would have made me not even go to that Sara Lee store, I would have just, bypassed it, because I would have just gone to the men's type stores that had men's, possible belts. But because of the rain, even that kept me just walking down there, because I'm like, I don't want to get drenched. I'm fixing to go to church, And so I just, that's actually God's intervention to keep me from going back to the car and, driving down. I would have never gone to that corner. Anyway, but God is good. He is totally alive. Jesus is real. He's alive. He wants to move in our lives. All I can say is the pure heart shall see God. And as long as my heart is pure, and I allow the Holy Spirit to purify my heart, and I don't do the things I used to do. I resist doing those things as I'm prompted to. And then I ask for forgiveness when I do the wrong thing. God just continually moves, and he's the funnest thing that I've ever known. I mean, he's not a thing, but a person. But it's cool to see how he does things. And there's a thing in the Bible that talks about knowing his ways and walking in them. And you start seeing little things, and you're like, wow, okay, something's going on. Kind of like the Kyle story, and I knew, something is different here. But I didn't understand what it was until later. And God showed me. But anyway, I thought it was pretty cool. God is so cool. So God bless y'all. And until next time. Hey, be sure to like this and subscribe if you would. It helps me out a lot. And I will talk to you later. Thanks a lot. Bye.